Uh, so, first of all, hello everyone. I'm Onolina from Thinkas. I'm the project coordinator for the Junior Kolkata Literary Meet 2022. And it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to our festival this year. This is our sixth edition of curating the festival in association with the Tata Steel Kolkata Literary Meet. And we're delighted to have with us Lavanya Karthik, who is an award winning author and illustrator of over 30 books for children. She's also the creator of the popular Ninja Nani series of graphic novels and Dreamers, an acclaimed series of innovative picture book biographies. Today, she will talk about her wonderful book, The Boy Who Played with Light. And we can't think of a better way to start off our sixth edition than a book that is an homage to the great artist Satyajit Roy on the wake of his centenary. Thank you so much for joining us, Lavanya. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be part of this literary festival. And hi, everyone. I'm Lavanya. And they never want to use lots of words where they can just make do with one. They like to club all of these people into one word, and they use the word children. So let's jump in and pretend that all of you are just children and not all these fantastic things. So hi, I'm Lavanya, and I write and illustrate books for children. And I've done a lot of those. I've done a lot of books. Here are some, and they're very heavy. So I write all kinds of books, picture books, like the heavy ones I just showed you, novels and graphic novels. I write a series called Ninja Nani, for instance. And most recently, I've been writing a very, very interesting set of books that I absolutely love. They're called the Dreamer series. And they're a set of picture book biographies. Now, what is a biography? Of course, they are stories about real people, people who've done something very distinctive in their field, something they've, inventors, scientists, all kinds of people. But these books are a little different in that they don't tell you the entire life story. They focus on one very important part of their lives in their childhood. So, like I said, the way all of us are explorers, deep sea divers, scientists, adventurers. Well, this looks at all those people disguised as children. So let me jump right into it. I'm going to share some pictures from my books, so that you can sort of get a little taste of what the books are like as well. Yeah. Well, this is the Dreamer series, and as of now, there are 4 books in the series. Let me quickly take you through each of them. There is firstly the girl who loved to sing, which is a look at the life of a very renowned Pandavi singer called Pijan Bai. Now, Pijan Bai grew up in extremely harsh circumstances, in extreme poverty, but nonetheless, she managed to make a name for herself by the age of 13 as a singer, and she pretty much invented the style of singing that she performs in, and she is known throughout the world. In fact, when you now talk of Panmani, the first name that strikes you is Pijan Bai. And here's a quick look at some of the pictures in the book. This is Pijan Bai today. And a little glimpse into the book and the pictures that I've drawn to show her life. This is Pijan struggling to sing even when she's not allowed to. And here's a point in her life when she's forced to leave home. She runs away. What happens next? Well, the easiest way to find out is to pick up The Girl Who Loved to Sing. The next book is about renowned author R.K. Narayan and his younger brother R.K. Lakshman. It's called The Boys Who Created Malgudi. And there's a third boy who features in this book, and that is Swami. Now, Swami is a fictional character created by R.K. Narayan. And what this book looks at is the origin story, so to speak. It's how all 3 of them somehow just came into their own. This is R.K. Narayan and R.K. Lakshman, not as the adults that they were famous as, but as little kids. There's R.K. Narayan as a teenager, and that's his much younger brother, R.K. Lakshman. And this is whom we meet in the book that I've written. And this is a book about R.K. Narayan worrying about being a failure. And by modern day standards, he'd probably be called a loser because he fails at pretty much everything he does. Exams, tests, getting published, even finding an audience for his work. And this is a book about him worrying if he'll ever make it out. And it follows him through his misery. And on this one day when he takes a very, very strange but interesting journey through his town, and at the end of it, he discovers something that changes his life. And here's my third book in the Dreamer series, which is The Girl Who Was a Forest. Have I made a mistake? Is that a typo? Can you be a forest? Well, yes, you can. This is Dr. Dr. Janaki Ammal, who is pretty much a pioneer in botany in our country. The first Indian woman to perhaps to get a PhD, to travel out of the country and make a name for herself in botanical research. She has made all kinds of developments that have changed the face of agriculture in India. She is very literally the reason our sugar is as sweet as it is today. That is Janaki Ammal. But before she was this scientist, she was a young girl struggling to make sense of the kind of rules that kept her bound in her small town in Kerala. There were all kinds of rules about being a girl, about the kind of caste that she had, about her class in society, girls not being able to study. And she struggled to get free of those rules. And this is the story, again, of one day in her life when a conversation with her father changes everything for her. But now, to get back to the book that we're supposed to discuss today, that's The Boy Who Played with Light. This is a book about world-famous director Satyajit Ray. And I don't think he needs any introduction to people in Calcutta because that's where he's from. And I must say that my journey towards this book pretty much started all the way back when I was a kid in school. And it started with a single book called The Select Nonsense of Sukumar Rai. I'm going to talk a little bit about that book a little later on in this session. But let's begin. Now, we all know Satyajit Ray as a director, as a creative genius. He made movies. He designed costumes. He wrote the opening titles of his films. He even he designed the posters. He composed the music. He was a genius in every field. But before all of that, before he became this powerhouse creator, he was a little boy called Manik. And there, in the other side of this slide, you can see pictures of him. That's the boy we're going to talk about in this book today. And now picture Manik's life. It begins here in 1921 in Calcutta, in North Calcutta, in 100 Gorpar Road. And this is also the home of the famous printing press run by his grandfather and father. You can see it's U. Ray and Sons, and they were renowned across the city for their printing technology, which they had pretty much invented and innovated as they went along. And apart from the books and magazines that they printed, they also printed another very, very amazing magazine called Sandesh, which was again a magazine I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Which was a magazine exclusively for children, and written and illustrated almost entirely by Sukumar Rai himself and his other family members. But wait, this is not a book about Sandesh. This is about Manik himself, and this is the first house Manik lived in. And he talks in his memoirs of running around through this house, running around the machines of the printing press, imagining his own stories and poems and drawings being printed one day in that magazine. And here's a picture of the press. In fact, this is the only known picture of the press that was used back in those days, in the early 1920s. But to get back to the story, here's Manik again. And here's Manik talking about light, the magic of light, the way it danced on the walls and the floor of his father's printing press, and the way it shimmered on the pages of the magazines that were printed there. And he looks at the light that's shimmering on the pictures that his father draws. Now, I must say that this picture is actually his only, it really illustrates one of his perhaps his only memory of his father, which was of Sukumar Rai painting by the window with a ship passing by outside on the river while Manik was playing in the room. Because very shortly after this, Sukumar Rai passed away. And life changed for Manik. That's when the shadows appeared. The shadows that settled under Ma's eyes after Baba passed away. And the shadows that pool on the floor of the press as one by one, the great machines fell silent. And the shadows that watched from the corners as Manik and his mother are forced to move out of this house, across the city, into a far smaller dwelling to live with his mother's uncle. Sorry, his mother's brother, his own uncle. But the shadows don't seem to go away, because before long, we find that Manik seems to see them everywhere. They're behind furniture, they're in corners looking at him, they're crouching under tables. They follow him through the house. Now, I should tell you here that once Manik moved to his uncle's house, he was pretty much alone all the time because his uncle, of course, left home to work, and his mother also began traveling across town to teach embroidery at a women's institute. And this left Manik pretty much alone for, a very, very large part of the day. Now, most of us, you and me perhaps, what would we do if we were alone? Perhaps we'd enjoy the first hour, I'm alone, I get all the space to myself. I can eat what I want, I can do whatever I want, I can take a long nap. But by the end of the day, I know I'd be bored, I'd be worrying, I'd be saying, where's everyone? I want company. Now, Manik was not like that, because what he did was get busy. Manik was a very quiet child, but he had this huge imagination. And what he did was he used to draw, he used to read books, he used to write, he used to just spend hours thinking up stories, daydreaming. Later on in his memoirs, he talks about how he enjoyed this time of his life. He said, I never felt alone because I had this entire universe inside my head. And he would get busy. He had a lot of things to do, even at the age of 5 and 6. And he cracked down and started doing them. But before long, the shadows, these very strange shadows that seem to be following our character Manik in the book, creep into his drawings, and he decides to talk to people about it. And what does his mother say? She says, you're going to be an artist just like your father. What a beautiful imagination you have. So he goes to his uncle, he goes to his cousins, but they too laugh and they say, excellent, Manik, we love the stories you tell us. Now sit back and think, what is this? What is this about shadows? What am I talking about? Are they even real? Are they in his head? Are they in his drawings? We'll find out soon enough. Because before long, here's Manik, and here are the shadows, and they seem out to get him. Because they're chasing him through the house, upstairs, down corridors. And meanwhile, his aunt and his uncle are saying, listen, we're trying to sleep. What are you doing out there? But here's Manik dodging and ducking and dueling with the shadows that seem to surround him. As he runs through the house, there he is, trying to get away. He sees an open door. And Manik races towards the door, dives right through it, slams the door, and Now I'm going to leave you right there and dive right back into Manik Da's real life, which is what he went on to be what he went on to do as an adult, which is he was a phenomenal artist. And these are pictures of some of the film posters he designed for the many films that he made. Notice I've been talking throughout about shadows and light. Well, shadows and light and dark were pretty much what fascinated Manik Da most in his work. And you can see them in every aspect of the books, of the films he made, of the paintings he created. Here are some posters, for instance, where he makes the most dramatic use of light and dark, of shade. Here are some more posters of one of his most famous films. And the posters that he designed for the film itself. Other things he made, these are his very own sketches for all the movies that he would make for the posters he designed. And here, the most, the the light and dark and shadows at play in his films. These are stills from some of his films. And you see at once the very dramatic use of light and dark and, yes, shadows as well. Again, in illustrations he used to make for other stories that he wrote, for books. He was also, for a while, a creative director in an ad film, in an advertising agency. And he made a lot of these, he did a lot of illustration work, which was considered very cutting edge for the time. He was perhaps the father of graphic design in India. More sketches. Again, look at the blacks and the whites and the strong contrasts that he uses in his drawings. So I think you get a hint of what I'm talking about when I'm talking of, when I say that he played with light, because it was clearly a lifelong fascination with him. There's a picture of Manikda himself in his studio. Now, I've done a very, very quick run through of both bits of my book and Manikda's life. And what's been fascinating about this deep dive into researching and writing this book is how much I learned about Manikda himself. For instance, he was extremely tall, and that meant that he couldn't really sit at a conventional table to write and draw. So you see him scrunched up in his chair with his feet up on the table, and he used to draw on his lap. And that's something he did throughout his life. That's a very fascinating piece of trivia that I learned. What else did I learn? Well, before he started a film, he would draw the entire movie out frame by frame in a sketchbook. He would pretty much paint the film before he made it. In fact, his very first film, Pothe Panchali, was not even made with a script. It was made entirely from a book like this, filled with sketches. Just the artwork that he imagined up in his head for the movie is what he based the entire movie on. It seems unbelievable, but that's pretty much how he did. At the young age of 35 or so, when he started making the movie, he based it entirely on his vision, the vision inside his head for this film. Other things I learned, that yes, as I said, he was a graphic designer. He made he illustrated a lot of advertisements for the firm he worked for. And remember, I mentioned a magazine called Sandesh. Well, when Manikda's father passed away, they had to sell the press and shut down the magazine. But guess what? He started it up again. So Sandesh returned to print when Satyajit Ray, he started the magazine up again. And if you thought he only drew in black and white, well, no, he didn't. He did a lot of work in color as well. And here are some pictures of some amazing posters and book covers that he designed. Again, you can see the very striking use of color, blacks and whites, of course, and the way he played with not just light, but also text, with form, with shadows, with colors. And another thing I learned about Satyajit Ray in the making of this was that his parents were extremely interesting people too. Now, that's Shukumar Rai, who started this whole journey for me. And those are some pictures. Those are the illustrations he made for some of his poems. But and of course, he was famous as a writer, an illustrator. He was running the magazine Sandesh for a while before he passed away. What's less known is how much of a fascinating person Manikda's mother was as well. Her name was Suprabha Roy, and she was quite an artist too. Though there is not much recorded of her art, of her sculpture, she was quite an amazing person. She was an artist. She sculpted. She drew. She was an expert at embroidery, and she was known for something called the Kashmiri stitch back then, that she went on to teach at an institute that she went to for many years. And she is perhaps the single most influential person behind Satyajit Ray's creative journey, I feel. So I did say I was going to stop my talking about the book back then at the last frame. So I'm going to show you just one more frame, which is what Manik sees in the room. And now this is what he sees in the room. And I'm going to leave it right here in a bit of suspense. It's an upside down image of something that's on the wall of his room. What does this mean? Where does this lead to? And what does this even have to do with his fear of shadows And wait a minute, if he's so afraid of shadows, how come they're such a big part of all the movies he made and the art he made? And how is it? I mean, what is the connection? Well, I could tell you, but I think I'd like you to just pick up a copy of The Boy Who Played with Light and find out for yourself. So that's pretty much my, in a nutshell, The Boy Who Played with Light. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. If you could put them in your chat box.
Thank you so much, Lavanya. I will sort of present some of the questions that have come in. We do have some people who are interested to know a few things. So let me just start off with one. One of the commenters has asked that, if this is an adult, so that you might have found a lot of information while researching for this book. As a librarian, I am curious, how did you decide what to include and what is fit for children?
I did, in fact. I did what I would call a deep dive into literature about Manekda. And I read pretty much everything written about him and all the books that he wrote himself. And I must say it was a massive journey because I needed to bring the frame down smaller and smaller into one aspect of his life. It did take quite a while, but I finally zeroed in on his fascination with light, the way he used it in his art, in his movies. And that got me thinking about a story about light, about also his huge imagination. There was a fact that while he stayed alone at home, for what was he up to? What was going on in his head? And finally, there was this one incident that he does talk about in his memoirs of the effect that I mentioned in the last frame of this upside down inverted image that he sees on the wall. And I wanted a story that would connect all these various aspects, and that's what the book does finally. So I just took this one little bit. It was literally one line in his memoirs. And that was the germ of the idea that became The Boy Who Played with Light.
Right. And then there's another question about, so you're both a writer and an illustrator. So how do you sort of change these different roles and, change between these roles, and which one is more challenging if you had to, decide between the two?
Well, actually, I think it never stops, because the thing with when you've written what you're illustrating, there is always the issue of you wanting to fine tune things, of wanting to whittle the text down further so that the illustrations do more work. So it's always this give and take. There's this interplay constantly going on. Whereas when you're illustrating for someone else, you don't have that luxury. So in terms of which is easier, I would say illustration is far more challenging. It's far more work than writing.
Okay, and we can see some wonderful illustrations in the book as you shared earlier. So we can see where those hours of work have gone into, definitely. We also have a few questions that have come in from WhatsApp and other sources, which is one of the questions being, do you have any special memories of a movie by Satyajit that you might have watched as a child or as an adult that you could share?
Absolutely. See, I was a child in the 80s when Doordarshan used to show all the award-winning national films at night. As a result, I've had the privilege of seeing pretty much all his films. And of course, I am not pronouncing it right. I'm sorry. But Pothaid Panchali was my very first film. But I went on to see all of them. And I know that I was utterly fascinated with, the Appu trilogy, Gopi Baga, of course. I mean, those are films I used to, I have gone on to see multiple times later, on videotapes and CDs, and now, of course, YouTube. These are films that they never cease to amaze you. I mean, they remain fresh regardless of how many times you see them. And there's always something new to discover. So I would say pretty much all his films.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, we all sort of have some sort of nostalgia and childhood memory associated with, his films. And again, I think it's been a real pleasure to hear somebody else also share that sort of joy and love for his works today. We have one of the comments, as young people can only ask, somebody's asking, why was the boy running in the book? And if you'd like to take that question on.
I think that's actually a very good question, but you're going to have to find a copy of the book and read the whole thing to find out why and what was going on with him and those shadows.
And speaking of shadows, there's also a question that we've received of, asking if you as a child noticed shadows and light as well, like Manik in the book did.
But actually, as a child, I was also a very quiet, though I was a very gloomy child, but I actually enjoyed being alone. And I was the kind of kid who skulked around corners and pretty much stayed on my own. And I had this entire universe in my head. Yes, now that you ask me, yes, I have invented shadows, because I was from the very start making up stories about things and imagining situations and creating entire narratives about, the tiniest of incidents happening. So I would say, yes, shadows were a big part of my life too.
Wonderful. And again, I think it's something very interesting what shadows and light have been used to, signify in the book. And again, for our audiences out there, if you haven't yet read the book, we would, definitely encourage you to grab a copy and find out exactly, what is the shadow and the light that we are talking about. Then another question that we've received is, did you find anything, special about him while writing, the book? Like, is there anything in particular that you found which really stood out to you that you could share today?
I think there are so many things one learns about, reading about a life like this, so rich in creative genius, so much to learn. But I would say if there was one thing, it is focus. You are never too young to begin a craft, or you're never too, unskilled. You just begin. If there's something interests you, you have a passion for something, you begin. And because throughout his life, he would probably call himself a student. He was Manikda was constantly drawing, constantly reading, listening to music. And he wasn't just about books and words, because he found his inspiration everywhere in music. As a teenager, he developed a taste for Western classical music. And he is pretty much self-taught, because that interest went on to, it also led him to, I think, travel through his city, because he was looking for old record stores to buy, affordable music. And music sheets. That led on to him teaching himself how to write a score, how to read music. He went on to learn how to play the piano for himself without any training, without a teacher. That says a great deal about dedication, focus, and just following your passion.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of things we can learn from, Manikda as we know him. And I think this sort of message that you're never too late to do something or find a passion, and if you really love something and you work hard at it, you will reap the benefits in whatever form they may be. I think that's a very valuable lesson that we can all take in and use in our lives. Now we have another question that's along similar lines, which is what made you think about writing about Satyajit Ray's childhood in particular, and was there any specific reason behind that, or what was sort of the thinking there?
Well, this entire series follows, it's similar. It looks at these remarkable people, these achievers, but through the frame of, through the lens of their childhood. I think for children to read about, it's very important for people to learn, for kids in this generation to learn about writers like R.K. Narayan and Janaki Ammal and Satyajit Ray, because, the way media is changing, they are rapidly being lost to us just because of just the abundance of other kinds of content. Whereas these people are classics, they're iconic, and they need to know about them. But at the same time, a conventional biography will tell you, yes, they were great, they grew up, and as adults, they had all kinds of achievements. I feel a lot of times, to children, adults are, they are powerful. They can achieve pretty much anything. They're immortal. They can do whatever they want. But who are they as children? To be able to relate to someone like Satyajit Ray in terms of fear, the things that make us all the same, fear or a big imagination or just, some little quirks. I think that makes all the difference to a child to be able to relate to someone like, someone who's so iconic, but at a level that they can reach out and touch literally.
Yeah, and I think again that's so important to know that these great figures that we've sort of revered and loved all our lives, they started out as young children, not too different from us. And so Satyajit Ray was at some point Manik, which brings me to another question that somebody asked is why are we calling Satyajit Ray Manik at all?
Oh, okay. Because that was the name that he was most, that was the affectionate term used for him throughout his life. It's the name his parents gave him when he was born. It means jewel, Manik, a precious stone. But that just stuck to him throughout his life. So, even his contemporary other directors, the actors who worked with him, everybody referred to him as Manik Da. So I jumped in and I do it as well.
Wonderful. And so we have these, in museums or galleries where we have Nimai Ghosh's depictions and writing about Satyajit Ray. You often see Manik Da everywhere. Yes. So yes, I hope that answers the question and solves the mystery for you. And we have somebody who's also curious about sort of your dual role of a writer and an illustrator. And they want to know which one do you like, doing more, illustrating or writing?
Well, I love them both. They're both challenging. But I must say, the thing about writing is you can continue to think about a plot in your head. When you're running or you're out for a walk, you can constantly work at writing. Because it can go on in your head, even if you're not writing. Whereas illustration, the only time you can draw is when you're sitting at your table, you've got a book, you've got a pencil. That's about the only time. So I find that writing is a little freeing that way, because it can go on even when you're not actually writing. You're also writing in your head when you're reading, because you're constantly looking at inspiration and looking at the way other people have used words or used ideas. So all that I would call it's all writing. So I would say, yes, I think writing is it gives you a little leeway to be mobile and, still be in creative mode.
I think we can all sort of relate to that, having that sort of freedom and being able to create as one would like. And I also had a question as I was reading the book. I sort of wanted to know, there are some sort of heavy subjects that you have tackled, although, not as, not as sort of explicitly as, other books might. And I, wanted to know, how do you sort of balance that, fine line between not going in too deep or, not really overtly talking about something, but still keeping a bit of the essence in it so that one does understand what these, signify. And so, how do you sort of balance that in a way that, a child might relate to, but also sort of understand and, perhaps, gain something from?
Well, I think, it's different with each book. But I think perhaps you are more successful when, rather than trying to tackle and solve an entire subject or an issue, you just create enough of a space to begin a conversation. For instance, what do the shadows mean? There are aspects of this book that might get a kid curious to start talking about, or the Janaki Ammal. One of the factors was caste, and the role of women, or the restrictions on women at that time in India, and what it means, what it meant for her and her future, and how she managed to get around all those restrictions. So I think these could just begin conversations that a child could have with friends, with teachers, with parents. I think perhaps that is the most that is what a book can do. None of these books, I would say, really, because given the brevity of the text and given the fact that the pictures are really doing all the heavy lifting. There is only so much one can talk, but I think it's great. I think a book is successful if it creates this doorway for a child to explore a subject or an issue on their own.
Absolutely. And I think, the boy who played with light has done that in a spectacular manner. And again, I love the fact that you mentioned the illustrations, because I think that does, there's something about, saying a lot without saying a lot. And, as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. We have another sort of question about, again, as young people can only ask, why have you called Satyajit Ray the boy who played with light in your book?
No, that's a great question. But again, as I said, you'll get the answer if you find a copy of the book and look at and what I mean with light, with playing with light, playing with shadows. And as I said, as I showed in some of the later pictures, he played with light pretty much all his life. Being in his drawings or being in film, even his music, even the costumes, everything that he designed. If you look very closely, you pretty much understand that's what he's doing. He's playing with light, playing with dark, and having a lot of fun with his friends, the shadows. Now, why did I say the friends? Again, get a copy of the book, find out.
Thank you so much. And I think, we'll end the questions there, but I do want to share a very interesting comment that we've received before we sort of wrap up for the day, which is Satyajit Ray focused on the shadows in his movies, even though he was afraid of it in his childhood. And we can link it to Batman, who was afraid of bats, but became a superhero connected with bats. And I think
that's a very profound, there's a lot of depth in what you said. Yes, there are connections. Yes, absolutely.
So with that, I'm happy to call this session to a close. But thank you so much, Lavanya, for joining us, and for the audiences who were here with us today and shared their really interesting questions and comments. For your information, as you may know, we have another session for your age at 5 p.m. today as well, and coming up later. And again, while we would love to have these sessions offline, we're glad that we could bring you this discussion in other ways, and we could have Lavanya join us all the way from Mumbai and talk to us today. So thank you once again, Lavanya, and thank you to the Tata Steel Kolkata Literary Meet for supporting us with the Junior Kolkata Lit Meet in 2022. And everyone, I hope to see all of you again at 5 p.m. as well. Thank you so much, Lavanya.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And hope we can have more such wonderful discussions in the future. Thank you.
Bye-bye.